Now, the signers knew when their names went out that the king would put a death warrant out on their heads. Mary Catherine Goddard did not have to reveal her name when she printed that document, but the courage to do so, recognizing her risk of life, to me is such a courageous move that we need to remember it because she didn't have to do that.
You are listening to Historyman, the platform for historians, curators, and authors to tell their stories of the American Revolution, walk in the footsteps of heroes, and proclaim freedom reigns. On today's episode, we are very fortunate and excited to have Richard V. Battle, the award-winning author of the AmeriCANS, Who Made America series. His new book, AmeriCANS, Who Made America the 20th Century, the American Century, has just been published and released. We are looking forward to talking to Richard about his books. But he wrote a book about Americans who made America, the 18th century, the birth of the Republic. So welcome, Richard.
Well, Eric, thank you so much for having us. And it's always fun to talk about our founders and the gifts they gave us that we enjoy today.
Richard, you've done a great job marketing. We talked briefly about that, marketing these books. Tell me a little bit about the turn of the phrase AmeriCANS.
Well, about 4 years ago or so, I got sick and tired of listening to the media, our pop culture, some of our political leaders and others continuously disparaging the country and talking about how bad America was and just looking at everything from a negative attitude and how our kids and grandkids couldn't have futures as good as we've had them and how the young people today think they have it worse than any other generation. And the inspiration came to me that what's really built our country over these 250 years is that AmeriCAN-do spirit. And that spirit was partly in us, but then was force multiplied, I believe, by the dual gifts of economic and political freedoms that our founders gave us in our Constitution and Declaration. And so I wrote, the first book was AmeriCANS, Who Made America, not AmeriCANS, a series of essays about how to and the leadership qualities of that AmeriCAN-do spirit. And then, and I'm going to cut the story short, all of a sudden the inspiration came about illustrating people. And so we've put 3 volumes out now, AmeriCANS, Who Made America the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries. We illustrate over 120 people, over 1,000 quotes, 150 illustrations. And it's a book, those are books that are designed to help people embrace the AmeriCAN-do spirit and enrich their lives and inspire others.
I think it's fantastic. I really do. In a time where information is being curtailed to only coming from certain sources, especially when we get into AI, I appreciate the fact that you were going and illustrating these people in the proper way. So I think people need to refer back to these flawed individuals that came together and created a wonderful country, and our country is what it is. So thank you for that. How can people find your books?
Well, our website is richardbattle.com, and all books there are signed, and we're happy to inscribe them when people have gifts. If someone will email me, richard@richardbattle.com. All 14 of our books are on Amazon, including most of them are in Kindle and audio versions as well. And I'd like to comment on what you just said about the flawed people. And yes, if we look at the first objective of the preamble of the Constitution, it says to form a more perfect union. And so our founders recognized they were imperfect. We're no more perfect than they were. And so it is a continuous process. I love Vince Lombardi's quote about his team. He said, "Gentlemen, we're going to pursue perfection, but perfection is impossible. But in pursuing perfection, we will gain excellence." And so that's, I think, the story of our country. So we get to choose, and I choose to highlight the positive aspects of these flawed people, not the negatives. Because if you just highlight the negatives, then you basically cancel them, and it's a discouragement for any positive growth and application. And so I'd rather encourage and inspire people to be positive than focus on the negatives.
I know that on your website you have General Kane, John Dan Raising Kane, said your patriotic commitment strengthens our nation in countless ways by honoring their service, reinforcing the values they defend, and helping sustain the spirit that unites communities across America. And I think that is a perfect encapsulation of what you're doing, and I so appreciate it. Take us through this book that we're talking about, The Making of America. Take us through some of the, I don't want to say characters. These were real people. That's the difference between science fiction and reality. These were actually real people that made a difference in a real world, in a real country. For me, that is one of those things that is very affirming, that they are real people, much like you and me, and really made a difference. Starting with ideals, they weren't a mob. They actually thought through these processes. What exactly is the individual's role in government? What is the role of government in the individual? They thought through these things. So tell us a little bit about some of these heroes from that first book.
Well, and I think you're so correct. And all we have to do is compare our revolution to the French Revolution, the differences in how they were executed. And our founders were brilliant. They went and read extensively and studied past civilizations, what worked and what didn't work. I think one of the great examples of that's the Connecticut Compromise that ended up having dual legislative chambers, one representation on population and two equal representation by states, so that the small and large states could be balanced, for example. So they were so brilliant in how they set this up. And it's interesting, the people who detract from our country today, just like in the French Revolution, they don't operate on ideas as much as they operate on emotions. And so that's something I think that's so important. I look at people for their unique application of the AmeriCAN spirit, because there's so many different ways that you can implement it. Not all of them are alike. So we talked about looking at Patrick Henry, for example, and he's such an interesting person. He was in the military a little bit, but he left the military because I think he figured out that he could better serve in the discussions and setting up the Constitution there in Virginia. He was the first governor of Virginia. He was a great orator. He was an inspiring leader for the people. So he took his individual God-given gifts and applied them in a different way than, say, George Washington did, or Henry Knox, or some of the other people. And it, as I tell people, it took everyone to win independence. It's taken everyone to get us to this point. It takes all of us today doing the things we do daily to continually contributing to better our country.
Well, I think what you said there about he had certain talents that maybe other people did not have. He was positioned perfectly in this moment. Tell me what you like best about him.
Well, I'm going to give you the one quote. We all know the end of it, but I think it's important to hear the entire quote that he gave in this fiery speech in 1775. He said, "Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it. Almighty God, I know not what course others take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." And we have a discussion in this country today where we have socialists trying to take over, and they sell free stuff, but they don't tell people they have to give up their individual freedom and this God-given gift that we've been given in order to even try to attain that. And that's the thing that people need to recognize. There's nothing more precious than our individual freedoms that we've got. And we've had them eroded by government over time because government can't do anything for us without doing something to us. And there's always a price of giving up liberty to let the government do something else.
kudos to him and others for articulating exactly where that freedom versus slavery, that line was drawn. It is interesting, and I'd be interested to know how you wrestle with the fact that a lot of these founding fathers were talking about freedom and liberty, but were still slave owners. How do you rectify that?
Well, and I get that question quite often, and I think it's a valid question. And I think what they did was they could have given up slavery, but if they would have done that, they would not have united in one independence. And I think that they came up and they recognized they had to compromise to not outlaw slavery in order to get all 13 colonies together, as well as trying to get the help from the French and the Spanish to win the independence. And then they could work on the slavery issue later. And I think that's, to me, is the simple way to look at it. Is it perfect? No. Did it help those enslaved at the time? No. But establishing the country was paramount to all issues at that time, and independence and freedom were the most important things first, so they could act on these things later.
So you think they thought it was a long game?
Well, absolutely, because they recognized there were people that abhorred slavery, but they recognized they couldn't push that to the detriment of independence at that time. And so they had to make a choice. Do they stand on that principle and lose the War of Independence? Or do they compromise, win the War of Independence, and then come back later and try to make that change? And I think that's decisions that people come into in politics and business today of all types, maybe not that magnitude.
Another big firebrand of that time, Patrick Henry certainly was one of us, so to speak. But tell me about Thomas Paine. How does he enter into all of this?
Well, what interests me about him is he was born and lived in England and didn't come to America until about 1774. And he was another one of those people that all of his life, he was just kind of an ordinary guy. Nobody really expected him to be intelligent or outspoken or a leader or anything else. But then he gets a job with a newspaper here in America, and all of a sudden his mind explodes with being able to be a critical thinker of the issues of the day. And so he transforms from reading the things that he's printing into writing ideas. These are the times that try men's souls, common sense, the American crisis #1 that Washington read to the troops in 1776 as motivation. His words probably contributed much more to the war effort than if he'd have carried a musket at that time. But again, he exercised that spirit when nobody believed it. And it illustrates a lot of times people will pigeonhole us. They'll see us for how they see us today, and they think that's all we can be. And I think it's important for us not to look at people how they are, but look at people and what their potential is and try to encourage people to fulfill their potential, especially our young people.
Well, that's motivating right there. I'll tell you what, that's good stuff. So Thomas Paine and Edmund Burke, and I don't want to get into a big political discussion because that could take several episodes, if not a lifetime. But him and Edmund Burke kind of had this healthy debate back and forth, and Thomas Paine seemed to be very big on the freedom, very big on the liberty, and the human nature will dictate a lot of this from generation to generation. And Thomas Burke was like, there's a limit to some of this, and you're not just talking about the present generation, each generation as you go along. There's a responsibility to past generations and future generations that you have to keep in mind when you're talking about liberty and you're talking about freedom. So those type of debates are still going on today. But Thomas Paine was certainly influential, and it was tied to the publishing aspect, the printing aspect. Yes?
Yes. And I want to go back. You said something extremely important. They believed, as people for thousands of years believed. Thucydides said 2,500 years ago, human nature is the one constant in history. It's always there. and they believe human nature would be the same tomorrow as it is today and was before. And when you believe that, we can take things like the Bible, the Constitution, Declaration, the wisdom of the ages, and we can use those to help our lives. Some of the problems we have today are we have people who believe human nature evolves. And so if you believe that, then none of the wisdom of the ages or the Constitution, none of that applies. And so to me, the first thing when I look at somebody, how do they believe about human nature? That tells me how they're going to believe about other things as well. And I believe human nature is proven to be constant. And that's a gift from God that enables us to learn from all those things in the past, as well as help those people in the future beyond our lives.
Well, talk to me a little bit about having these ideas is one thing. Being able to communicate these ideas effectively is probably, in my mind, one of the great treasures of the Revolutionary War period, in that these people talked in conferences and committees, and then all of a sudden people up and down the Eastern Seaboard found out about what those discussions were, and they were able to do that because of the printing presses and the publishing houses that happened. One of those, Thomas Paine, certainly took advantage of that. And like you said, Washington read his pamphlet out to everyone. But there were a lot of pamphlets going on back and forth all across the colonies at that time. I know here in South Carolina, William Henry Drayton published a pamphlet on the rights of men, and that was and he was a big firebrand down here. But his ideas got to the public because of these printing houses. One of the big printing houses that you have talked about is the Goddards. Is that right?
Yes, Mary Catherine Goddard, and I introduce her as the woman who signed the Declaration of Independence. And people cock their heads and say, I thought it was only 56 men that signed the Declaration of Independence. She is a woman who needs to be revered and appreciated, not just for other women, but for all Americans, because she grew up, her dad had a print shop in Baltimore, her brother worked there. She wasn't schooled in the regular fashion because she was a girl, but her mother taught her languages, sciences, all kinds of different things. You could say she was a homeschooled kid. So she went to work with her dad. He died. Her brother ran off, left her the printing press. She became the first postmistress in Baltimore. She printed a lot of these pamphlets. And the way she would put her signature on the pamphlets was printed by M.K. Goddard, because that way no one knew if it was a man or a woman, because they discriminated against women in business at that time. But she got the contract to print the first copy of the Declaration with the signers' names on it in January of 1777. And when she printed it, instead of putting on there printed by M.K. Goddard, she put on there printed Baltimore, Maryland by Mary Catherine Goddard. Now, the signers knew when their names went out that the king would put a death warrant out on their heads. Mary Catherine Goddard did not have to reveal her name when she printed that document, but the courage to do so, recognizing her risk of life, to me is such a courageous move that we need to remember it, because she didn't have to do that. And it's just unimaginable how much courage she had. And that shows how committed she was. And she had this quote about, what think ye of Congress now? That day evidence that Americans would rather die than live slaves.
Fantastic quote. And it's another affirmation that it wasn't just the men. It wasn't just the wealthy men. It wasn't just the men that were in this fight. It was people from all walks of life, including the women, and who were in very pivotal spots in this engagement. Tell me a little bit about Dr. Joseph Warren.
He's someone who gets shortchanged all the time because he was killed at Bunker Hill. But long before that, when the movement was rising from the late 1760s, before Bunker Hill in 1775, he was a leader in Boston. He and Samuel Adams were probably the two big leaders in Boston of the independence movement. And again, he was such a leader. He sent off Paul Revere and Dawes on April 18th, 1775 for their midnight rides, for example. He was letters of on the Committee of Correspondence in Boston. He was one of the big leaders for years and years and years. And what was amazing here, he was a doctor. When they had the Battle of Bunker Hill, he could have stayed in the back and treated the wounded, but he said he wanted to risk his life like the other people were doing. He didn't want any special favors because of being a doctor, and he went out, got in the front, led by example, and unfortunately was sacrificed at that point. And so he died. All these years he put into it, and he died before the Declaration of Independence was even written.
Find it interesting that he was one of the main movers of the Suffolk Resolves that came out in September of 1774, which is one of the first resolves I call them the associational documents, where the colonies were trying to figure out what exactly are we uniting under? What are we upset about? The Suffolk Resolves were one of the first that came out of the nation after the Articles of Confederation. So it wasn't just that he picked up his rifle and went to the front. He like you said, he was one of the founding fathers in many of those conversations that happened almost 2 years prior to the Declaration of Independence. He was tied to the Suffolk Resolves. The fantastic biographies of these heroes, and these are just a small encapsulation of those you included in this book. So, Mr. Battle, what is your definition of freedom?
Well, freedom to me is God-given rights that can't be changed by men. As they say, if men can give you rights, they can take them away. And those are rights of individual liberty. We all are individuals formed in the image of God. We live as individuals, and that's one of the great blessings. We're not part of a group. I don't rely on my being a man to get men's freedoms. I don't rely on my skin color to get certain freedoms. My rights are individual, and I get to interact with people as an individual. And that is freedom. Now, do I get everything I want because of that? No. But that's one of the things with freedom. We don't get everything we want, but we get the right to pursue that happiness, if you will, and strive to be the best we can as individuals. And to me, that is great. I don't want to be subject to other people giving me something or taking something away. I want to be able to live that freedom and make the choices and be the best I can.
I want to play a little devil's advocate with you on this. Okay. What if you fail?
Failure is part of life. I've failed many times in life already, and I'll fail again at something. And so I've learned something from every failure. We're not promised success. We're promised the pursuit of happiness. Failure in the people I write about is common, and the people who achieve some of the greatest things overcome many adversities and failures as well, because it's not how many times you get knocked down that counts. It's how many times you get back up, as the old saying says.
Fantastic. Tell us about your series of books. Tell us how you can get a hold of them, how we can get a hold of them, and what you hope people will gain from reading these.
Well, and again, it started with Made in America by AmeriCANS, not AmeriCANS. And these essays are leadership, how to exercise your AmeriCAN-do spirit. And that's the first book. And then we have the 3 books that are the profiles, 123 profiles, over 1,000 quotes, 150 illustrations. Very easy to read from upper middle school and above, inspirational, motivational, leadership type lessons. And we're working on the 5th, the capsule of it, another book of leadership essays we hope to get out next year.
If people would like to get a hold of you from a motivational speaker standpoint, how would they find you?
Well, my website's richardbattle.com. They can email me, richard@richardbattle.com, and we'd love to hear from people. And any way we can be of help instilling that can-do spirit and love of country, we're all in.
Richard, thank you for being with Historyman. We look forward to getting your books and reading your books. I'm like many people who are probably listening. I am freaking motivated, man, and I am. It is wonderful to be an American. I echo your sentiments about being free. Is a wonderful thing to pursue your gifts, your talents, your dreams, but you also have to recognize that failure is part of that, and you can learn in that failure. But pursuing of the dream is what makes America great in many respects. So, thank you so much for spending time with us.
My pleasure, Eric. God bless America.
God bless America. Exactly, buddy.